Early success is a terrible teacher. You're essentially being rewarded for a lack of preparation. So when you find yourself in a situation where you must prepare, you can't do it. You don't know how. Colonel Chris Hadfield. Today we're covering Aeromedical and ADM. Here's the battle plan. We'll start with a scenario like we always do. If you guys have anything you want to share with us that you've done research on, that'll be the time. We'll get into Aeromedical and ADM, do a quiz, and assign some homework. As usual, if you have any questions, just shout them out. All right, so let's see what happens here. We're holding short at Arlington. Who wants to talk me through what radio calls you're going to be making as you're departing? All right, no worries. So basically, as we're departing, we want to say Arlington traffic, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa, departing runway 34 Arlington. We always want to bracket our radio calls with the place that we are at. So for this situation, we are at Arlington, so AWO. So Arlington traffic, the reason we say that is because there is no control tower at Arlington. And we're going to say Arlington traffic, our call sign, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa, departing. We always want to let people know what we're doing at the airfield and what we plan, like what our intentions are. Departing runway 34, we can tell that's the sign right here telling us we're getting onto runway 34. We are currently at Alpha 1, the taxiway. Departing runway 34. And then what we would plan on doing. If we're going to stay in the pattern, we might say close traffic, or we might say departing to the west, or we might say departing to the north. And then again, it with Arlington, because we often share a radio frequency with other airfields. And so it helps other people in the airspace know who you are talking to, where you are, and what your intentions are. So let's see what happens. If you guys want to call out anything you see, any thoughts as we're departing, I'd love to hear them. If not, that's okay. I can do all the talking today if you'd like. All right, so to reiterate, Arlington traffic, so that's the 172 Papa, departing runway 34 Arlington. And here we'd say lights, camera, and action. We're making sure that our nav lights, strobe lights, landing lights are all on. Camera, that's our transponder, is set correctly. And then action is the mixture. And then as we depart, we're adding full throttle. Airspeed's alive. Typically, we rotate at 55 knots. There's 50, 55, 15.5 knots. And we're climbing out. VY climb is going to be 79 knots. There's 79-ish. And just talk about some things we could do better here. We could actually bug our heading 3-4 instead of 3-3. It helps, be a bit more professional. We don't want to start making any turns until we're about 700 feet above the ground. Arlington, I think, is at about a little under 100 feet, if I'm not mistaken. So at 800 feet, or between 700 and 800 feet, we'll make our turn to crosswind or depart. There's 800 feet, making a left turn. This is the crosswind leg. So as we've departed, we've gone upwind. Now we're turning crosswind, and we would make a radio call that goes like this. Arlington traffic, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa, turning left, crosswind, Arlington. And sometimes it might be helpful to let them know what runway we're actually referring to. So crosswind for left traffic, runway 34. And we've reached traffic pattern altitude, so now we're making a left turn again onto the downwind leg. So it'll be like Arlington traffic, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa, turning left downwind, runway 34, Arlington. And here we're 1,000 feet above the runway. We're going to be running through our before landing checklist. Looking left, it should be right halfway above our strut. Right there, looks good. And yeah, that's the first half of our pattern. So after we're on the downwind, what's the next few steps as we're coming to land? Anybody want to take that? No worries. So on the downwind, once we're abeam the numbers, that's going to be over here. That's where we're trying to aim for. Once we're abeam the numbers, we're going to pull our power to typically around 1,500 RPM. Set our rate of descent of 85 knots, and we're going to put in 10 degrees of flaps, and we're going to descend down to about 700 feet above the ground. At a 45-degree angle from the landing surface, we're going to make our left turn to base, and we'll make our radio call. So Arlington traffic, Cessna 2 Sierra Papa, turning left base, runway 34 Arlington. And then we're going to continue dropping flaps, so then it's going to go to 20 degrees of flaps, reduce speed to 75 knots, on the base leg and then make a turn to final once we're lined up with the runway. Remember that as we're turning from base to final, this is the typical area to spin the aircraft. So if you overshoot and try to overbank and incorrectly apply rudder, this is the area that people are most likely to spin. So keep that in mind as we're turning to final. And of course, on final, we're going to be at 65 knots. You can be at 20 degrees of flaps, or you can add another notch, 30 degrees of flaps, and transition to slow flight over the runway. And remember, we're not a space shuttle, so slow flight over the runway and use power and pitch and proper coordination to get onto the runway. Questions? Sweet. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Just making sure. Let's see. Did anybody have a chance to take a look at when you do not need a medical? Referring to FAR 61.23. No, that's all right. Definitely worth a read. Not required for your exam, but it is worth taking a look at when you do not need a medical. So let's get into aeromedical factors and ADM, which stands for aeronautical decision making. So aeromedical factors is first. We're going to start with hypoxia. Hypoxia, in plain English, is a state of lack of oxygen to the brain. We don't have oxygen going to the brain, and there are 4 flavors that we cover. They are hypoxic hypoxia, hypemic hypoxia, stagnant hypoxia, and histotoxic hypoxia. In general, the symptoms are all the same: euphoria, headache, delayed reaction time, visual impairment, and loss of consciousness. And you typically want to lower altitude, use supplemental oxygen, and terminate the flight if you suspect hypoxia. Let's see. So hypoxic hypoxia is when you're up at altitude, and because of the lowered density of the air, there's not going to be as much oxygen available for your body to absorb. And so you're not going to be able to absorb that oxygen and send it to your brain. So you become hypoxic. Hypemic hypoxia can be caused by carbon monoxide poisoning. This happens when your blood can't take the oxygen to the cells in your body because of something else taking its place. In this case, it's carbon monoxide. And so there's the problem here is the blood. There's plenty of oxygen in the air, but you've got something in your bloodstream that's taking the place of the oxygen, making it so you cannot use the available oxygen. Stagnant hypoxia, I think, is the coolest one. This is when we're pulling G's and all the blood is pooling at our legs. So if you roll into a 80-degree turn, pull hard, trying to get on your opponent's 6, and you're pulling all those G's on your body, all the blood is going to pool down at your legs, becoming stagnant, and you can't get blood up to your head, and you pass out. You can get something called G-lock, or G-induced loss of consciousness. So that's stagnant hypoxia. And the last one is histotoxic hypoxia. This is due to alcohol or drugs, basically impairing your ability to use oxygen in your blood. So that's the 4 flavors of hypoxia: hypemic hypoxia, histotoxic hypoxia, stagnant hypoxia, and the other one that which one did I miss? Hypemic hypoxia, hypoxic, hypemic, stagnant, and histotoxic hypoxia. There we go. All right, moving on. Let's see. There we go. So in plain English, what is hypoxia? That's all right. Hypoxia is a state of oxygen deficiency in the brain. It's when you don't have oxygen in your brain. And what are some ways a person may become hypoxic? Things like drugs, alcohol, being at high altitude, or pulling excessive Gs, or carbon monoxide poisoning are some ways you can become hypoxic. Let's move on to hyperventilation. This is essentially overbreathing, and you breathe out all the carbon dioxide in your blood. So this can happen when you are stressed out or scared. When a student pilot or a passenger is feeling a lot of anxiety, they can start hyperventilating. And what we want to do is have them slow their breathing rate, breathe into a bag, or talk out loud to try to get over that hyperventilation. So what are the differences between hypoxia and hyperventilation?
Hypoxia is uh, oxygen deficiency, and hyperventilation is when you're breathing too fast.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. You got it. So something to keep in mind, they actually share some symptoms. So you might see that somebody has like, you know, spatial disorientation or euphoria, and they might be hypoxic or they might be hyperventilating. And it's pretty obvious which one is which. If they're like, that's hyperventilation. But if they're just being lethargic, that might be hypoxia. So moving on to spatial disorientation. This happens when you don't know what's going on in the aircraft. You might not know if you're up, down, turning, and it's caused by misleading information being sent to your brain by various organs. A lot of the time, if you accidentally fly into the clouds, you can become disoriented. I've got a student right now who's working on his first. He did his first flight under instruments, and he was like, "Wow, I can't believe how your body lies to you. You think you're in a turn or you think you're straight and level, and it's nowhere near what's actually going on in your aircraft. And what you need to do is pay attention to your instruments. Learn to disregard what your body is telling you and focus on your instruments. Yeah, so explain spatial disorientation. Send it. No worries. Essentially, it's when you get confused about what's going on in the aircraft if you fly into the clouds or if you fly at night. There are a couple of different types of spatial disorientation. I use the acronym ICE flags to remember it. ICE flags. So I is for inversion illusion. C is for the Coriolis illusion. Coriolis. E is for elevator illusion. F is for false horizon. This happens when you look outside and you think like a set of lights is the horizon. You orient the aircraft to the false horizon. L, is the leans. A is for autokinesis. Autokinesis with my horrible handwriting. G is the graveyard spin and graveyard spirals. And then S is for somotographic illusion. You guys don't need to know these as in depth as we're kind of going into right now. In the main points are, if you get caught in the clouds or if you get caught at night and you don't know what's going on, disregard what your body's telling you and focus on your instruments. Trust your instruments and fly your way out of it. And don't forget that you always have the ability to call ATC for help. There's always something you can do, so don't ever give up. Right. These are all really cool, by the way. We can get into them as we move into instrument discussions later on. Let's talk about your vision. Especially at night, we want to avoid staring at or looking at bright lights before a night flight. When we're scanning, we want to use slow scanning. We don't want to just jerk around looking at different parts of the sky. We want to use a slow off-center viewing at night to scan small portions of the sky slowly. This is different from daytime. In the daytime, of course, we can just look straight at things and be fine. But at nighttime, we have to use our rods, and we are better at seeing things with our peripheral vision at night than we are during the day. Remember that haze can create the illusion of traffic or terrain being farther away. So if it's a hazy day, be aware that it's going to look like things are farther away, and they can actually be closer than they actually are, or closer than they appear. Excuse me. So let's go back to talk about carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless gas produced by combustion engines, and it can enter through the vents in your aircraft. If you detect a leak, a lot of aircraft have a little device that'll help you detect carbon monoxide in the cockpit. If you see that there's a carbon monoxide leak, you need to land the aircraft, because if you get carbon monoxide poisoning, it increases your susceptibility to hypoxia, and so you might have a bad day. Let's put it that way. All right. What is hypoxia?
Oxygen deficiency.
That's right. Oxygen deficiency in the brain. What are some ways a person may become hypoxic?
High G's, intoxication.
Mm-hmm. High altitude. I can spell altitude. Oh my God. Yeah. So high altitude. You got a couple of them. Yeah. High altitude. Pulling G's, carbon monoxide, and then being drunk or high. What is spatial disorientation?
when your body's telling you something that's not right.
Exactly. Yeah. You could be in the clouds and your body's telling you that we're straight and level when in reality we are in a spin or a spiral down to the ground. What's carbon monoxide?
When there's exhaust leak and you're inhaling that those carbon monoxide.
Yeah, yeah. Carbon monoxide itself is a gas produced by combustion engines, and if you have a leak in the cockpit, yeah, it can lead to some bad times. Sweet. You guys have any questions about that part of things before we move on to ADM? Sweet. So, aeronautical decision making is the systematic approach to the mental process used to consistently determine the best course of action. It's essentially doing the right thing. We use a lot of risk management. The objective here is to reduce the risk associated with each flight, and it's important that you maintain good situational awareness. You have to recognize your problems and exercise good judgment. In plain English, it's all about making good, smart, safe decisions as pilots. Here are the 4 fundamental risks in aviation. There's the pilot. Recognize that most aviation accidents are caused by us, the pilot. We are the weak link in the system. The next one is the aircraft. Is the aircraft airworthy? Has it been maintained correctly? The next one is the environment. What's going on, in the airspace, your passengers, that kind of stuff. The mission is what your objective is for the flight. Are you trying to get passengers, to a resort or something? Are you trying to do a search and rescue mission? That kind of thing. So it's what the purpose of the flight is. And these are the 4 risks that can lead to, bad situations. Here are some common dangerous behaviors that pilots are known to exhibit. Scud running. This is when you are flying low to the ground, trying to avoid getting into the clouds. So let's say we've got the ground here and we've got a cloud layer here, and we are staying, right above the legal height, let's say 500 feet, and we're staying right below the legal distance from clouds, which is another 500 feet. So we are just sandwiched between the cloud and the ground, and this is scud running. So this is a dangerous behavior here. The next one is continuing flight into instrument conditions. This is when you, let's say you're scud running and you climb into the clouds, and all of a sudden you are a VFR rated pilot, not IFR rated, and you're in the clouds and you have no idea what's going on, and you become disoriented. You spatial D. And then the other one is neglecting checklists. This is actually a pretty common one. I've seen some of my students have neglected their checklists, and that's not good. That's not good. You need to, use your checklists, pre-flight checks, your pre-flight inspections, your before takeoff, climbing out, landing checklists, but before landing checklists. These are there to make sure that you don't miss something important. Actually, I had a friend who busted a check ride because they forgot to put the landing gear down on final approach, and the examiner had to knock it off. Unfortunately, I mean they went around and did it and got retrained. It's fine, but just be careful. You can land with landing gear up if you forget to use your checklist. So use your checklists. All right, let's recap. What are 4 fundamental risks in aviation?
Pilot, aircraft, environment, and mission.
Yeah, there you go. Pilot, aircraft, environment, and mission. I think there's another acronym that they use, PAVE, which is pilot, aircraft, environment with an ENV, and then external pressures. This, I think, is another way of remembering it. But external pressures refers to the mission. What are some common dangerous behaviors?
Scud running, flying into instrument conditions, and not checking checklists.
You got it. Scud running, continuing flight into instrument conditions, and neglecting checklists. Too easy. Ooh, let's talk about some hazardous attitudes. These are the 5 main hazardous attitudes the FAA has identified, and they are anti-authority. This is essentially like, don't tell me what to do. You don't want to follow the rules. Impulsivity, you just want to get it done now. Invulnerability, this idea that nothing bad will ever happen to you. Macho, it's like, look what I can do, look how cool I am. And then resignation, it's the idea that, oh, what's the use? I have no control over the situation. So these are the attitudes, and then there are the antidotes. The first step in overcoming a hazardous attitude is to recognize that we are exhibiting it, right? So recognize that you're feeling anti-authority, like, oh, don't tell me what to do, I can do what I want, right? No, stop. The rules are there for a reason. Typically, rules are written in blood. Somebody has done something goofy and gotten themselves hurt, and so every rule that we have on the books is there for a reason. Impulsivity. You want to just get it done, get it over with, knock things out fast. The antidote here is to slow down, not so fast, do it right. Invulnerability. It's this idea that nothing bad can happen to you, that you are untouchable. The antidote, of course, after we recognize it, the antidote is to say that, yes, it can happen to me. There is a chance that I could lose an engine, or that I could lose my radios, or whatever. So don't assume it can't happen to you. It can absolutely happen to you. Macho, look at what I can do. Look how cool I am. I'm going to go do barrel rolls in a Cessna 172. This is a very common one among young males, unfortunately. And it's the antidote is to say, no, taking chances is foolish. Do the right thing. If you want to show off how good of a pilot you are, take a passenger up and show them how smooth your turns are, how precise your ability to hold altitude is. And then resignation. This is the idea that, oh, well, I've lost an engine. I'm going to die. I might as well quit. No, there's always something you can do. And this is true in life, too. There is always something you can do. Even if it feels like things have gone completely off the rails. We're not trains, we're airplanes. So, but there's always something you can do. So don't give up. Keep fighting. Fly through the crash, I think is the saying. Yeah, so those are the 5 hazardous attitudes and their antidotes. Now let's talk about the risk management process. These are the 6 steps that the FAA has identified. So let's say there's a problem. We want to identify that hazard first, and then assess the risk. How bad is the situation going to be for our flight? What can we control in this situation? Analyze the controls. All right, do I still have full control of my aircraft? Do I have the radios? What do I have at my disposal that can affect the outcome? Make a decision about the controls. Make control decisions. All right, what are we going to do to fix this problem? Use them, do the thing, and then monitor the results and then see how it works. I'm not a huge fan. I'll be honest with you. I'm not a huge fan of this process. It seems a little bloated to me. This is the guy that the quote that we heard earlier today, Chris Hadfield. He actually outlines a 3-step process that astronauts use in the International Space Station to overcome a problem. 1 is warn. Warn your team that there's a problem. 2, gather information about the problem. And then 3, work the problem. Warn, gather, and work. Systematically attack the problem with your team to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So warn your team, get your team together so you can work together to attack the problem. Gather information about it. Don't just attack it without realizing what you're doing. Actually, the example he gives is a fire on the International Space Station. And you don't want to just go attack the fire because you might cause a bigger problem and kill everybody. So you have to figure out, what is the cause of this fire? Can we use a fire extinguisher, or is that going to make things worse for us? And then finally, work the problem. And like before, don't give up. There's always something you can do to improve your situation. So yeah, warn, gather, work the problem. Also, go check out this book, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. It is one of my favorite books. I read it like once a year, and I recommend it to everybody that'll listen to me. So this is a percentage of general aviation accidents. And you can see pre-flight, this is pre-flight, takeoff, initial and climb, cruise, descent, maneuver, approach, landing, and other. The flight time, the amount of accidents that happen on takeoff and landing are the 2 biggest categories. We don't really spend a lot of time in them. There's only 2% of our flight time is done takeoff and initial climb. But almost a quarter of all of our accidents are happen during initial takeoff and or takeoff and initial climb. So when we are low and slow to the ground, we are most vulnerable, right? So that is the time we need to be most vigilant as we are flying, especially here coming into land. That favorite place to spin when you're turning final. This is the runway, base. Downwind, base, overshoot, coming into final. Right here is when we're gonna spin in and hit the ground. Right. So keep that in mind when you're low and slow. Pay attention. Keep your head in a swivel. Do the right thing. Okay, let's recap. What are the hazardous attitudes that we've identified?
It was impulsivity, macho, resignation, invulnerability. There's one more.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it was. Let's see. Anti-authority. Did you cover that one? Yeah, anti-authority, impulsivity, invulnerability, macho, and resignation. Remember, the first step is to identify that you've got this hazardous attitude and then apply the appropriate antidote. Okay, things to keep in mind. You are the pilot in command. So you are basically it. You are the guy. You have to determine whether or not you're doing the right thing. The buck stops with you as the PIC. You're responsible for making sure that you can fly. So the question you should ask yourself is, could you pass a medical exam right now before my flight? And be honest with yourself. If you're not feeling well, if you're stressed out for whatever reason, maybe it's time to postpone the flight and fly tomorrow. We use the I'm safe checklist. I am safe. Oh, I can spell. F-E. Illness. Am I sick? M is medication. S is stress. A is alcohol. Have I been drinking? F is fatigue. Am I tired? Did I get a good night's sleep? And E is eating. Did I get a good breakfast or lunch before we departed? Remember that human error is the most common factor in most preventable accidents. We are the weak link in this situation. So you have to be on top of your game, make sure you're making good decisions. This right here is really interesting. A pilot involved in an accident usually knows what went wrong and was aware of possible hazards. So make good decisions and keep yourself and your passengers alive. Boom, made it. Now we got a short quiz here. How are you guys feeling? Any questions before we move on?
Nope.
Sweet. Let's burn this candle. Which statement best defines hypoxia?
8.
Too easy. Which sign indicates the runway distance remaining? There's Echo, Foxtrot, and Lima. What do you guys think? Well, let's run through it. What does this one tell you? So remember, black square, you are there, tells you are on a taxiway. Black square, you are there. If it's got numbers, this tells you you're on a runway. And we're asking for the runway distance remaining by process of elimination. Lima is the only one that's left. Which is a correct response to counteract the feelings of hypoxia in flight?
A.
So we want to descend. So one of the things that hypoxia can be caused by is a high altitude. So we want to get down to thicker air and get some good oxygen in our lungs. What is it often called? What is it often called when a pilot pushes his or her capabilities and the aircraft's limits by trying to maintain visual contact with the terrain in low visibility and ceiling?
Scud running.
Scud running. You got it. That's A pilot should be able to overcome the symptoms or avoid future occurrences of hyperventilation by doing what?
B.
That's right. Slow the breathing rate, talk into a bag, or talk out loud. Give me one second. I'm going to close my door here. All right. What technique should a pilot use to scan for traffic to the right and left during straight and level flight?
A.
That's right. Systematically focus on different segments of the sky for short intervals. Too easy. What force makes an airplane turn?
Is it
What do you think?
C?
So it's actually this horizontal component of lift. So when we roll our wings, we're actually right here when we're straight and level, all of our lift is vertical. When we roll the wings, we're actually going to generate lift. It's still going to be perpendicular to the wings, but now we've got a horizontal component of that lift, and we've got the vertical component, and this horizontal component pulls us in our turn. Your brother wants you to take him flying. You must have made at least 3 takeoffs and 3 landings in your aircraft within the preceding
90 days?
90 days. Too easy. All right, let's do it. Determine the density altitude for the given conditions. Altimeter setting 30.35 inches of mercury, runway temperature 25 degrees Fahrenheit, and airport elevation 3,894 feet MSL. I might just do this one with you guys. I'm not going to give the answer if you guys want to try it, but I'm going to run through it. All right, what do you guys think?
A.
I agree. 2,000 feet MSL. So let's recap what I just did. First thing we're going to do is check our altimeter setting here. It's right between these two, so 30.35. We're going to interpolate or find the average between these two. And I got the average, 394. Because it's negative, we're going to subtract it from our airport elevation of 3,894 to get a pressure altitude of 3,500. And I highlighted here, this is the pressure altitude, the diagonal lines. So we're going to be somewhere between this 4,000 and 3,000 mark. So right here in the middle at 25 degrees Fahrenheit, and we always want to be careful about what temperature scale we're using. 25 degrees Fahrenheit up here between 3,000 and 4,000 comes out to 2,000 feet density altitude. Remember, density altitude is what the airplane feels like it's flying at. So it's going to feel like you're actually at a lower altitude because of how cold and high pressure it is today. So that's good for us, actually. This would be a good density altitude at this elevation. Pilots are more subject to spatial disorientation if
B.
That's right. If visual cues are taken away, if we get into the IMC or fly into the clouds. Ground effect is most likely to result in which problem?
B.
Becoming airborne before reaching recommended takeoff speed. Large accumulations of carbon monoxide in the human body result in
Is it A or
so
B?
A and C may be both symptoms, but the one that we really care about is this loss of muscular power. What is the antidote when a pilot has a hazardous attitude such as macho?
B.
Taking chances is foolish. What is the most effective way to use the eyes during night flight?
B.
That's right, off-center viewing. A slightly high glide slope indication from a precision approach path indicator is what?
3 white lights and 1 red light.
That's right. You got it. The elevator controls movement around which axis?
Is it longitudinal?
It's actually the lateral axis. So we've got the lateral axis here, the vertical axis here, and the longitudinal axis. Yeah, so the elevator pitches us about this lateral axis here. And I like to think of it as like doing lats when you're working out, trying to get your shoulders nice and big. Where should the 200-pound weight be positioned to balance the plank on the fulcrum? And I'll run through it with you guys. All right, what do you think?
$45 inches.
That's right, 45 inches. Which marking indicates a runway holding position marking?
Is it D?
That's right. C, Charlie, tells us that this is where cars will drive. E, let's see. I think that's a movement area. No, wait. I'm not sure, actually. I'll have to double check this one. But yeah, it's D. This is the hold short marking. Detonation occurs in a reciprocating aircraft engine when?
C.
That's right. When the unburned charge explodes instead of burning normally. Which would most likely result in hyperventilation?
A.
Tension, anxiety, or fear. You got it. Made it. All right. If you're up for it, I would recommend going into your pilot operating handbook and doing a deep dive, and then reading about your aircraft's fuel system. Again, this is not a required part of the course, but it's definitely worth checking out if you want to be a proficient pilot. Keep reading the airplane flying handbook and the PHAC. And here is the website for testing yourself. I recommend knocking out 20 questions a day this week to sharpen your skills. Do you guys have any questions? Feedback, anything at all?
That was good.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm glad you guys you guys were able to make it. I appreciate it. It's always a blessing to share this with you guys. So, sweet. So next week, same time, I'll see you guys then.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. See ya.